I was just alerted on my phone through the app, the Yahoo News app, that Middle America, also known as Rural America, better known as Palm Colored Country, is now starting to feel the effects of the Wuhan. Now, the Wuhan has pretty much ravaged through major cities, major metropolitan areas, but you didn't really hear anything about Middle America, like the Midwest towns, the small towns that probably has less than 10,000 people in it at a time, or basically some of the towns that I spoke about when I was doing the state of Arkansas for my Sundown series. That would be considered like Middle America, Rural America. And what was interesting about this is the attitude that many of them had, which was almost identical to how black people were initially when we were saying that black people couldn't get it and stuff like that. They had that same attitude, and now it is slowly creeping in to those territories. Let me go ahead and read this article. It says the virus was slow to spread to rural America, not anymore. Grace Rose was getting worried last month as she watched the virus tear through New York and Chicago, but her 8,000 person hometown in southern Illinois still had no reported cases, and her boss at her pharmacy assured her it'll never get here. Now, this is in southern Illinois. Now, in Chicago, they kept saying how it's a lot of black people that are affected by this. I want to know how in the world did they not think that the virus was going to not touch there if it was in Chicago? But let me continue reading. Now it has. A new wave of virus cases is spreading deep into rural corners of the country where people once hoped their communities might be shielded because of their isolation from hard-hit urban centers and the natural social distancing of life in the countryside. Now pay attention to that, because words matter. Hard-hit urban centers, urban. When you think of urban, what do you think of? See, even in their mind, they thought that it would only hit the areas that were predominantly black. But man, were they sadly mistaken. And they thought that by them being in the country, that they naturally social distanced anyway, that it wouldn't touch them. Like we say, this virus does not discriminate. I just did a video talking about how a tiger at the Bronx Zoo just got infected with it. So if a tiger, a whole animal, a big cat could get it, what makes you think that you being in a rural area would not affect you? The Wuhan has officially reached nearly 3/4 of the establishment's rural counties, with 1 in 7 reporting at least one death. Doctors and elected officials are warning that a late arriving wave of illness could overwhelm rural communities that older, poorer, and sicker than much of the country, and already dangerously short on medical help. That's the thing about them small rural towns. Yeah, the pro for them is that they get away from the loud noise of the city and everything like that. But the bad thing about it is they are away from everything that they would need medical wise, which mostly is in metropolitan noisy cities where they are in huge consumption. Out there in those kind of towns, they might have 1 to 2 doctors that the whole town goes to, and that's it. Now they're about to be overwhelmed because of that. If y'all remember, I think I did a video about West Virginia, I believe it was, where they said the opioids out there is just running rampant and they can't really curb it because in a small town like that, they don't have a lot of medical people on hand. They have to go all the way somewhere else to get medical attention because their doctors, nurses, and everything like that are not in abundance out there. Like, those are places where people live at maybe to retire, just to get away from the noise from the city if they've worked in the city for all their life and they just want to get somewhere where it's nice and quiet. Well, I wouldn't say nice, but it probably is quiet. But those are also a lot of rundown towns. Like, rural America is basically the hood, the ghetto of the palm colored community. The suburbs, of course, that's where the upscale, I guess you could say, people are at. Let's see here. Everybody never really thought it would get to us, said Rhodes, age 18, who was studying to become a nurse. A lot of people are in denial. With 42 states now urging people to stay at home, the last holdouts are the Republican governors of North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, and Arkansas. Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota has suggested that the stricter measures violated personal liberties and said her state rural character made it better positioned to handle the outbreak. They had that same attitude that some black people had, saying that they couldn't get it. But see, the thing that kind of helped black people just a little bit is the fact that many of us, we don't live in rural areas. Them, on the other hand, could be their biggest downfall. And because they didn't get prepared for it, they are about to get hit hard. It's moving in slow now, but they about to get hit hard. So you got to think, this is rural America has a very high opioid rate, and now this is about to come in. And in recent years, they've started to get and developed a high HIV rate. And see, the thing is, like I said, because they don't have a lot of medical attention at hand where they can get access to that type of stuff, or they have to travel outside of their comfort zone, it's going to really, really hit them hard. They are going to fall like flies. So this person lives in an 8,000 person town, and with the way this virus is moving, I can see that population dropping down in half within a matter of months, depending on how hard they get hit. South Dakota is not New York City, Noem said at a news conference last week. Well, it's going to start looking like New York City very soon. But many rural doctors, leaders, and health experts worry that is exactly where their communities are heading, and that they will have very few hospital beds, ventilators, and nurses to handle the onslaught. We're behind the curve in rural America, says Senator Jon Tester of Montana, who said his state needs hundreds of thousands of masks, visors, and gowns. If they don't have the protective equipment and somebody goes down and gets sick, that could close the hospital. And see, the thing is, a lot of people in rural America, because they did not take it seriously, like their president that they most likely voted for, they're not going to be prepared for what's about to come. If you can see what's going on with like New York and the DMV area and all the other places that got hit really hard, if they can't handle it and they live in their position where they have access to a lot of things, what makes rural America think that they're not going to get hit even harder? It was just slow to get there because you're in rural America. But once it hits, it's going to be looking like Tornado Alley during the summertime. If they don't have the protective equipment and somebody goes down and gets sick, that could close the hospital. Rural nurses and doctors, scarce in normal times, are already calling out sick and being quarantined. Clinics are scrambling to find couriers who can speed their virus tests to lab hundreds of miles away. The loss of 120 rural hospitals over the past decade has left many towns defenseless, and more hospitals are closing even as the pandemic spreads. The Wuhan illnesses and deaths are still overwhelmingly concentrated in cities and suburbs, and new rural cases have not exploded at the same rate as in some cities, but they are growing fast. This week, the case rate in rural areas was nearly double what it was 6 days earlier. Deaths are being reported in small farming and manufacturing towns that barely had a confirmed case a week ago. 14 infections have been reported in the county encompassing Rhodes' Southern Illinois hometown, Murfreesboro, and she recently quarantined with her parents, who are nurses, as a precaution after they got sick. Rich ski towns like Sun Valley, Idaho, and Vail, Colorado, have some of the highest infection rates in the establishment and are discouraging visitors and second homeowners from seeking refuge in the mountains. Indian reservations, which grapple daily with high poverty and inadequate medical services, are now confronting soaring numbers of cases. In some places, the virus has rushed in so suddenly that even leaders are falling ill. In the tiny county of Early in southwest Georgia, 5 people have died, and the mayor and the police chief of the county seat, Blakely, are among the county's 97 confirmed cases. It has been a shock for the rural county of a fewer than 11,000 people. Being from a small town, you think it's not going to touch us, Blakely's assistant police chief, Tanya Tinsley, said. We are so small and tucked away, you have a perception that it's in bigger cities. And that lied in the problem. They thought because they were a smaller town, had fewer people, that it wouldn't touch them. I don't know if they got the memo or not, but this is a global pandemic. Again, let me say, it's a global pandemic. It almost makes it seem like these individuals was not watching any type of news for the last month. That is all gone now. You say, wait a minute, I know them. She said it's like, oh my God, I knew them. I used to talk to them. I knew their family, their kids. It's a blow to the community each time. Even a single local case has been enough to jolt some people out of the complacency of the earliest days of the virus, when 45 spent weeks playing down the threat and many conservative leaders brushed it aside as a politically driven hysteria. In Letcher County, Kentucky, which got its first case on Sunday, waiting for the disease to arrive has been unnerving. Brian Bowen, age 48, likes the daily briefings by Governor Andy Beshear, a Democrat, and he is glad for the governor's relatively early actions to close non-essential businesses. Without them, Bowen said, we could have a really bad pandemic. We could be like California or New York. In Mississippi, a mostly rural state, the virus has spread to nearly every county by April, causing healthcare workers to wonder nervously when the governor would issue a stay-at-home order. Last week, he finally did, and doctors at the University of Mississippi Medical Center in Jackson breathed a sigh of relief. The state has now more than 2,000 cases. There was this chatter today at the medical center, people saying, oh, thank goodness, we need this to get to people to realize how serious this is, said Dr. Lou Ann Woodward, the hospital's top executive. While Americans are still divided on whether they approve of how 45 handled the crisis, the virus is uniting nearly everyone in the country with worry. Urban and rural, liberal and conservative, more than 90% of Americans said the virus posed a threat to the establishment's economy and public health, according to a Pew Research Center poll conducted from March 19th through the 24th. Some of the petty things that will be in the news and on social media before have sort of fallen away, said David Graybill, a Methodist pastor in Athens, Tennessee. There's a sense that we are really in this together. Now it's how can we pull through this and support one another in this social distancing. In Mangum, Oklahoma, a town of 6,000 in the western part of the state, it all started with a visit. A pastor from Tulsa appeared at a local church but got sick shortly thereafter and became the state's first Wuhan fatality. Then somebody at a local church started to feel unwell, a person who eventually tested positive for the virus. Then it was just a matter of time, said Mangum's mayor, Mary Jane Scott, before realizing they were infected. Several people who eventually tested positive for the virus had moved about wildly through the city, including to the local nursing home, which now has a cluster of cases. Overall, in the town, there were 4 deaths and 32 residents had tested positive for the virus as of Wednesday, one of the highest infection rates in rural America. You think in rural Oklahoma that we all live so far apart, but there's one place where people congregate, and that's at the nursing home. I thought while I was safe in Southwest Oklahoma, I didn't think there would be a big issue with it, and all of a sudden, here it is. Mangum now has an emergent shelter-in-place order and a curfew, just like larger towns and cities around the United States. Just as New Yorkers have gotten accustomed to Governor Andrew Cuomo's daily televised briefings, residents of Mangum have turned to the mayor's Facebook page, where she livecast status updates and advisories. On Monday night, it was the recommendation that residents use curbside pickup when going to Walmart, a broadcast that garnered more than 1,000 views in the hour after she posted it. Since we have no newspaper, that just shows you how small the town is, it's the only way I know to get the word out, she told viewers, after inviting them to contact her personally with any questions and concerns. She also has encouraged residents to step out onto their lawns each night at 7 p.m. where she leads them in a chorus of God Bless America. The virus has complicated huge swaths of rural life. Darvin Bentlage, a Missouri rancher, says he is having trouble selling his cattle because auctions have been canceled. In areas without reliable internet access, adults are struggling to work remotely and children are having to get assignments and school updates delivered to their door. The financial strain of gearing up to fight the virus has put much pressure on cash-strapped rural hospitals. Many have canceled all non-emergency care like the colonoscopies, minor surgeries, and physical therapy sessions that are a critical source of income. Last month, one hospital in West Virginia and another in Kansas shut their doors altogether. It's just absolutely crazy, said Michael Caputo, a state delegate in Fairmont, West Virginia, where Fairmont Regional Medical Center, the only hospital in the county, closed in mid-March. Across the country, across the establishment, they're turning hotels and sports complexes into temporary hospitals. And here we've got a hospital where the doors are shut. For now, there is an ambulance posted outside the emergency room in case sick people show up looking for help. Michael Angelucci, A state delegate and administrator for the Marion County Rescue Squad said the hospital's closure during the pandemic is already being felt. On March 23rd, emergency medics were called to take an 88-year-old woman with the virus to the hospital, Angelucci said. Instead of making a quick drive to Fairmont Regional, about 2 minutes away, Angelucci said that the medics had to drive to the nearest hospital, which was about 25 minutes away. A few days later, she became the West Virginia's first reported virus death. I know that was a pretty lengthy article right there, but I had to read all of it just to give y'all the context that rural America, middle America, y'all are not exempt. Everybody can catch that woo-woo. Anybody. And because they had a late response to it, and because they don't have access to a lot of the resources like we do, like as far as being in close proximity to medical facilities, they're going to really get hit hard. You heard that last part. They said the hospital that they could used to go to was only 2 minutes away. They had to drive 25 minutes away to the nearest hospital. And that's the story with many of those small towns. They move far away to get away from all the noise and everything like that. And, it's more close and it's more, more intact. But they're never prepared for something like this whenever a pandemic or something breaks out, like with them opioids and the HIV. And now this. They're not prepared for that. They're only prepared to get away from people. They're not prepared for when something like this sweeps through their towns. And it's, like I said, it's going to hit them probably harder than everybody else and very fast because it's not a lot of people there. But it is what it is. Like I said, the arrogance of America will be its greatest undoing, and I still stand firmly by that statement. Y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. Make sure you follow me on Twitter if you have not done so already. Have your notifications turned on, and I will talk to you in the next one.